Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to when you need someone to sift through just mountains of information, sometimes confusing stuff, and bring you some real clarity.
Yeah, find the signal in the noise.
Exactly. And today, we've got a story that's, well, it's pretty unsettling. It starts purely digital, like literally a Photoshop contest entry.
Right.
And it ends up crossing over into this horrific real-world tragedy, a moment that honestly shocked a lot of people.
It really did.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the Slender Man mythos.
This digital boogeyman.
Precisely. And there's this central question, this paradox that we really need to unpack for you today. It's kind of the mission here.
Okay.
How does a fictional creature, something literally invented online, break through? How does it cross that line from, internet folklore into actual real-world violence?
It's a disturbing question.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And exploring it means we have to look not just at the story itself, but like the underlying structure of fear, how it works.
Yeah, and to do that, we've pulled together quite a stack of sources. It's pretty diverse.
What do we got?
Well, we've got some really detailed academic work, analyses of internet mythology, people looking at the structure of the Slenderverse lore itself.
Okay, the academic angle.
Right. But then we also have the hard facts, the emotional accounts, the legal stuff surrounding that awful 2014 stabbing case in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's unavoidable.
Absolutely central. And then there's the aftermath critiques of how the media handled it, the debates around, moral panic.
Got it. So a real mix.
A real mix. And our goal really is to quickly, but, thoroughly dissect this modern digital folklore. What makes it tick?
Right.
How does something like this spread when it's written by, well, everyone, collective authorship?
Yeah.
And crucially, what happens when that line between fantasy and reality just dissolves, especially for younger people who might be more vulnerable?
Okay, let's get into it. The origin story seems like the place to start. Because this isn't some ancient myth, right? We know exactly when this thing was born.
We do. It's incredibly specific. The date was June 10th, 2009.
Wow, that recent.
Yeah. And the place was the Something Awful web forums, which, for those who don't remember, was kind of a notorious corner of the early-ish internet.
I remember it. Definitely had a reputation.
It did. And this was part of a contest, basically. A forum thread challenging users to use Photoshop or whatever image editor to create a paranormal-looking image.
And make it look real.
Yeah, that was the key. Pass it off as authentic, like found evidence.
And the user who actually cooked up Slender Man was Victor Search.
That's the online handle. Real name, Eric Knudsen. And the images he first posted, they were flashy, but they were, psychologically really effective.
How so? What'd they look like?
Well, they played on the mundane. Knudsen dropped this figure into the background of otherwise normal photos. So you'd see kids playing in a park, maybe on swings, just normal stuff. And then way in the back, maybe at the edge of the woods, there's this figure.
Just standing there.
Just standing there. Unnaturally tall, completely faceless, wearing a dark suit. Very subtle, very creepy.
Not like jump scare horror.
Mm-hmm.
More unsettling.
Exactly. It relied entirely on what people called realism and plausibility. It wasn't about gore. It was about planting the seed of paranoia. You look closer and your stomach just drops a little.
And the captions he added helped.
Oh, definitely. The captions framed them as, recovered evidence, photos found after children had disappeared or something bad had happened. It immediately built this sinister context.
So the core idea was there from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Faceless,
Mm-hmm.
tall, stalks kids.
Yes. Menacing, interested in children, often linked to disappearances. That was an absolute bedrock.
And then other people started adding things,
Mm-hmm.
like the tentacles.
Right away. That's the beauty or the horror of the medium. While Knudsen's initial image was just the tall, suited figure, other users almost immediately started riffing on it, adding details like, tentacles or branch-like arms, sometimes insectoid appendages coming from his back.
It was collaborative from the jump.
Totally. That fragmented, mysterious origin just invited people to add their own pieces, their own speculation. It became a shared project.
Which brings us neatly to creepypasta.
Oh.
That's the genre that really gave Slender Man legs, right? To break that term down.
Yeah, creepypasta. It's a great name, actually. It's a portmanteau, a mashup, like you said.
Creepy and bull.
Copypathita, which is, classic internet slang.
Right, for blocks of text people just copy and paste everywhere.
Yep.
Like chain emails, but on forums.
Exactly. Funny stories, dramatic ones, whatever, just blocks of text passed around. So creepypasta took that idea, easily shareable text, and applied it to horror stories.
So it's not just any scary story online. It's defined by how it spreads.
Precisely. It's this whole genre of internet folklore, horror stories, creepy images circulated widely across forums, wikis, social media, you name it.
And it borrows from older traditions.
Definitely. Structurally, it uses a lot of the same tricks as classic urban legends. Familiar settings, the woods behind your house, an abandoned building nearby. It aims for that feeling of this could actually happen, that plausibility.
To create that playful fear.
Yeah, playful uneasiness, paranoia, it wants to get under your skin a little bit.
And the authorship thing is key here. Victor Serge kicked it off, but he lost control immediately.
Completely. That's the core of the collective authorship model. Unlike, say, Stephen King writing a novel where he owns it, creepypasta thrives because the community takes over.
So people are sharing, reposting.
Rewriting, remixing, and crucially adding things, building out the world, the rules, the characters. The goal isn't ownership, it's participation. It's like this massive evolving story with no single author.
Digital game of telephone, almost, but for horror.
That's a good way to put it. And the speed it evolved at with Slender Man was pretty remarkable, which led straight into the Slenderverse.
And you absolutely cannot talk about that early spread without mentioning marble hornets.
No way. Marble Hornets was the rocket fuel. It launched just days, maybe 10 days after Nudson's first posts, June 2009.
So almost simultaneous.
Most. And it was brilliant for its time, a YouTube series using the found footage style.
Like Blair Witch?
Exactly like Blair Witch, but serialized on YouTube. It was presented as these raw videotapes being uploaded by the main character, Jay.
Okay.
He's investigating the disappearance of his friend Alex by going through Alex's old tapes, and things get weird very quickly.
And the format made it feel real.
Totally. It was released out of order in short clips titled Entry, #whatever. You felt like you were piecing together the mystery alongside Jay. Very immersive, very paranoid.
And Marble Hornets added specific elements to the lore, right? It wasn't just Slender Man lurking anymore.
It absolutely cemented key parts of the canon. First off, they didn't even call him Slender Man. They called him the Operator.
Okay, different name.
Different name, slightly different feel, but clearly the same entity. And they established iconic things we now link directly to the myth. The most famous is probably the symbol.
The circle with the X through it.
That's the one. It would appear scratched onto things or sometimes like a glitch or watermark on the video itself. Very ominous.
And it introduced physical effects.
Yeah.
Consequences for the characters.
Yes, this was huge. It wasn't just psychological fear anymore. Being near the operator or even just investigating him had tangible effects.
Like what?
Severe memory loss. Jay would find huge gaps in his own recordings. Intense paranoia naturally, but also physical sickness.
The coughing.
The coughing sickness, yeah. This really harsh, painful cough, sometimes described as like a pulmonary illness.
Yeah.
And distortions, video and audio would glitch out when the operator was near. These became accepted rules of the Slenderverse. It made the threat feel much more concrete.
So the myth is building steam, getting more detailed, spreading like wildfire online. For years, really.
Yeah, for almost 5 years, it was this huge, sprawling digital horror story, thrilling people, scaring people, engaging millions online.
Until May 31st, 2014, when it stops being a story. Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Yeah. The tone shifts completely. It becomes this grim, horrifying reality.
Yeah.
2 girls, just 12 years old, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, they lured their friend, their classmate, Peyton Leutner, who often went by Bella, they lured her into the woods.
In Cork.
Yeah, a local park. And then they attacked her. They stabbed her 19 times.
19 times they were 12.
12 years old. It was shocking, calculated.
And the reason they gave, this is where the digital folklore comes crashing into reality.
It's absolutely central. When they were questioned by police, they were remarkably clear about their motive. They said they did it for Slender Man.
For him?
They believed they needed to commit a violent act, specifically murder, to prove they were worthy, to become his servants, or proxies, as the lore sometimes calls them.
Proxies. Like in Marble Hornets.
Exactly. Or, alternatively, they thought this act would grant them passage to his mythical mansion.
Which they thought was real.
They genuinely believed it was a real place. They had this idea. It was located in the Nicollet National Forest, hours away in northern Wisconsin.
Wow. So after the attack, what did they do?
They just left her. They left Peyton for dead in the woods and started walking.
Walking where?
Towards the Nicollet Forest. They intended to walk over 300 miles to find Slender Man's mansion.
That just shows how how deeply they believed it, how immersed they were.
Completely. The fantasy had become their operating reality. The framework of the Slenderverse was directing their actions in the real world.
And the victim, Peyton, the severity of her injuries. It's hard to comprehend.
The details are brutal. 19 stab wounds. Some hit major organs, the diaphragm, liver, stomach. One narrowly missed a major artery near her heart.
It's incredible she survived.
It's truly miraculous. She somehow managed to crawl out of the woods to a path where a cyclist found her and called 911. Her resilience is just astounding.
And she spoke about it later, didn't she, when she was older?
Yeah, in 2019, when she was 17, she gave an interview. She talked about her recovery.
What did she say?
Remarkably, she said the whole horrific experience actually pushed her towards a career path.
Really? How?
She decided she wanted to go into medicine. She said seeing the complexity of her own injuries and the care she received made her want to help others in that way, turning trauma into purpose.
That's incredibly strong. Did she say anything about the girls who attacked her? The dynamic between them?
She did offer a little insight there. She mentioned that she felt one of them, Anissa Weir, seemed kind of jealous of the friendship she had with the other attacker, Morgan Geyser.
Ah, so maybe some underlying tension there already.
It suggests that, yeah, while Slenderman provided the narrative framework, the justification, there might have been this pre-existing, perhaps toxic mix of personalities and social anxieties brewing between them.
So the myth became like a focal point for other issues, not the sole cause necessarily.
That's definitely one interpretation supported by her comments, a shared fixation that allowed these other dynamics to play out in a horrifying way.
Okay, let's talk about the legal side. This must have been incredibly complex, dealing with 12-year-old accused of attempted murder.
Hugely complex and obviously very high profile. One of the biggest initial questions was whether they'd be tried as juveniles or adults.
And what happened?
Because of the severity of the crime, the planning, the violence, Wisconsin state law actually allowed for them to be charged as adults in the criminal system despite their age. That became a major point of contention.
Trying 12-year-olds as adults, wow.
Yeah, and then throughout the trials, the central battleground was really, is this calculated evil or is this profound mental illness?
Because diagnoses came out, right?
They did. Morgan Geyser was diagnosed with early onset schizophrenia. Anissa Weir received a diagnosis of delusional disorder. Shared delusional disorder, sometimes called folie à deux, was also discussed.
So their defense was built around that.
Essentially, yes. The argument was that their belief in Slenderman wasn't just a choice, it was a symptom, a manifestation of a genuine break from reality, driven by their mental health conditions.
So not legally responsible in the same way.
That was the core of the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect plea.
And the sentences reflected that? What were the outcomes?
They both ultimately avoided prison. Instead, they received long-term commitments to state mental health facilities.
How long?
In 2017, Anissa Weir was sentenced to up to 25 years in mental hospital. She'd be under supervision, with reviews. Morgan Geyser, whose diagnosis of schizophrenia was considered more severe, received a sentence of up to 40 years in a psychiatric institution.
So potentially decades of institutionalization.
Yes, committed until they are deemed no longer a danger to themselves or others, up to those maximum terms.
This whole case naturally got a lot of media attention. And then came the HBO documentary in 2017, Beware the Slender Man. But that film itself stirred up some controversy.
It really did. The documentary aimed to explore, how this internet myth could lead to violence. It had access to the families, interrogation footage, powerful stuff.
But people had issues with the focus.
Yeah, the main criticism, looking back at reviews and commentary, was that the film spent a disproportionate amount of time with the families of the attackers, Morgan Geyser's and Anissa Weir's parents and grandparents.
Showing their pain and confusion.
Exactly. Portraying them, often sympathetically, as grappling with this unthinkable thing their children had done. Which is understandable, on one level.
But the victim.
That was the problem. Many felt Peyton Lintner, the victim, was almost sidelined. Her experience, her suffering, her incredible survival story, it felt minimized in the film.
So the balance felt off.
Critically off for many viewers. It created this perception, rightly or wrongly, that the documentary was trying to make you sympathize more with the girls and their families than with the person they almost killed.
Yeah, I remember reading one critique saying something like, by focusing so much on the why from the attacker's side and barely showing the victim's reality, it almost accidentally encouraged empathy for the perpetrators.
That's a good summary of the main complaint. It felt like the human cost, Peyton's cost, got lost in the exploration of the fascinating psychology of the attackers and the myth.
Kind of mirroring the internet's tendency to focus on the sensational narrative over the victim's experience.
That's a really interesting parallel, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit. Let's move from the tragic events back to the myth itself and try to understand why it had such a powerful grip. How do scholars even classify something like Slender Man? He was made up in 2009.
Right. Well, initially, traditional folklore studies had a pretty straightforward and kind of dismissive label for things like this. Fake lore,
Fake lore, meaning
meaning it's fake, it's fabricated, usually commercially or just by an individual. It doesn't have those deep roots in oral tradition, that anonymous, passed down quality of authentic folklore. It was seen as, just fiction, basically.
but that view has been challenged.
Oh, strongly. Scholars, particularly those studying digital culture, people like Trevor Blank, argue that's an outdated perspective. They say the internet doesn't kill folklore, it's actually a super potent folkloric conduit.
A conduit.
Yeah, like a channel. Online spaces, forums, wikis, social media groups, they function as virtual villages. They create folk groups with their own shared customs, their own slang, their own ways of telling stories together.
So the medium is new,
hmm
but the process is still folklore.
That's the argument. The collective creation, the sharing, the adaptation, that is folklore in action, just happening incredibly fast and visibly online.
And within these digital groups, there's this weird relationship with belief, right?
Mhm.
People aren't necessarily saying Slender Man is real.
Exactly. This leads to this idea of serious play. It's this fascinating gray area. Users engage with the myth, they read the stories, watch the videos, maybe even write their own editions, all while kind of holding two ideas at once.
Which are?
I know this is probably fiction, but I'm going to engage with it as if it could be real. It allows for a deeper, more thrilling, more paranoid level of immersion than just passively consuming a story.
Playing along with the possibility.
Right. And the ultimate extension of this, the really wild part, is how the community sometimes brought in the tulpa theory.
Dolpa. That sounds esoteric.
It is. It comes from Tibetan mysticism, originally. A tulpa is supposed to be a being or an object created purely through mental discipline, through intense concentration, visualization, collective will. You supposedly manifest something into existence.
Okay. Bit out there. How did that connect to Slender Man?
Well, the creepypasta community sort of co-opted the idea of it, maybe half jokingly, maybe not. The suggestion became, okay, maybe Victor Surge just made up the pictures. But what if millions of people thinking about Slender Man, fearing Slender Man, writing about Slender Man, what if all that focused psychic energy, that collective belief, actually made him real?
Whoa. So the act of telling the story could summon the monster.
That's the chilling implication of the tulpa idea within the fandom. Slender Man isn't scary just because of the stories. He's scary because we, the audience, the participants, might be inadvertently creating him through our own fear and attention.
That's meta. And terrifying.
It is. The community is essentially playing a game where the ultimate failure state is that their collective imagination makes the monster physically manifest. That paradox is incredibly sticky.
Okay, that's the philosophical deep end. Let's get into the structure. Because academics digging into this found a really consistent pattern across all the Slender Man stuff, right? A three-part structure. This feels important.
This is absolutely crucial for understanding the mechanics of the fear. Yes, across the original forum posts, Marble Hornets, other creepypastas, games, researchers identified this recurring triadic structure. Three categories that define a person's relationship to the myth, and Slender Man controls the movement between them.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's the first category?
Category 1 is untouched. This is basically normal society, most people. They're ignorant of Slender Man, they live ordinary lives, they're safe in their lack of knowledge, they represent normalcy, social integration,
Blissful ignorance.
pretty much. Then comes the second category, and this is where almost all the narratives live. This is transformed, B.
Transform. What does that mean?
This is the state of anxiety, the elongated, stressful middle ground. These are the people, the protagonists of the stories, the players in the games, arguably the girls in Waukesha who know about Slender Man, they've seen the signs, maybe experienced the symptoms.
The coughing, the memory loss.
Exactly. The static, the paranoia, and crucially, this knowledge isolates them. Society, the untouched A, looks at them and sees someone who's paranoid, obsessed, maybe mentally ill. insane.
So they become socially marginalized?
Socially faceless in a way. They're still physically present, but they're fundamentally cut off from normalcy because of what they know or what they're experiencing. It's a prolonged state of high stress, aware of the danger but unable to escape or communicate it effectively.
That sounds awful. And the final category.
The final state is removed. C. This is the end game. These are the individuals who are entirely taken out of society, usually through death or unexplained disappearance. Sometimes maybe complete institutionalization where they lose all connection to the outside world. It signifies a total break, removal from the known reality.
And the really terrifying part is the movement between these states.
Yes, the directionality is key. It's almost always a one-way street. A, B, C.
Untouched to transformed to removed.
Right. And the critical point is, once you enter the transformed state, B, once you have that dangerous knowledge and start experiencing the effects, there's generally no going back to untouched A.
No cure, no forgetting.
Not really. Within the logic of the mythos, the knowledge taints you permanently. The only path forward eventually is towards removal. C.
Let's use marble hornets again. How does J fit this?
Okay, J starts as untouched A. He's just a guy looking into his friend Alex's weird old tapes.
Right.
The moment he starts watching them, digging deeper, noticing the operator, experiencing the static, the memory gaps, the paranoia, he becomes transformed.
B. And he stays there for ages.
For almost the entire series, his life becomes consumed by filming everything, trying to piece together lost time, constantly looking over his shoulder. He's deeply isolated. His friends think he's losing it. That's the perfect embodiment of the prolonged, stressful, transformed state.
And Slender Man, or the operator, is the one pulling the strings.
He's the agent of change. He exists outside the ABC structure, but he dictates the transitions. He toys with the transformed, increases the pressure, until eventually they are moved to removed. C. The lack of control characters have in state B is the absolute core of the horror.
What about those masked figures in marble hornets? Masky, hoodie. They seem different. Proxies, right?
Ah, the proxies. Yeah, they're really interesting within this structure. They're sometimes described as mediators within the mediator.
Yeah.
They seem to occupy this liminal space. They were likely transformed, be individuals who completely succumb to the operator's influence. So they're closer to removed, but still active.
And their appearance is important, the masks.
Hugely important, symbolically. The masks, the hoods, the often dark or nondescript clothing, it represents the erasure of their original identity. When Tim puts on the masky mask in Marble Hornets, he often has no memory of what he did.
So his humanity is suppressed.
Or removed. It signifies that the transition from B to C isn't just about physical removal, it's about identity deletion. The self is gone, even if the body remains as a tool for the operator.
That ABC structure, it's incredibly bleak, especially that feeling of being trapped in state B with no agency, just waiting for state C. Is there any way out in the lore? Any exceptions?
It's overwhelmingly bleak, you're right. The lack of agency in state B is the source of the dread. You're just waiting. However, there is one recurring theme across different narratives that represents a character trying to seize back some control.
Which is?
Suicide, unfortunately. In some Slenderverse stories, a character choosing to end their own life is portrayed as this desperate final act of asserting agency.
How is that agency?
Well, the logic seems to be, if the operator is inevitably going to move me to removed, C, I can at least choose how and when. I take control of my own transition rather than letting the monster dictate it, often in a far more horrific way. It's presented almost as a grim form of escape, choosing the end on your own terms.
Choosing the method of removal. Dark.
Extremely dark.
Okay, but despite all this high-stakes existential dread built into the structure, Slenderman also became a massive internet meme. There's tons of parody, humor. How does that happen? How does something so terrifying become funny?
It's a fascinating dynamic. Humor, especially parody, often works by being repetition with difference.
Repetition with difference.
Yeah. The jokes only land if the audience already understands the original thing, the base horror structure, the rules, the characters, the anxiety of state B. The humor comes from taking that known structure and deliberately twisting or subverting it.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, think about all the spin-off characters. You've got Trenderman.
Trenderman.
Yeah, he's Slenderman's supposedly fashionable brother. Instead of stalking you for your soul, he stalks you because your clothes are out of style. He'll, leave passive-aggressive notes about your color choices.
Okay, that's pretty funny.
Or Splenderman, who's all cheerful and wears polka dots.
Yeah.
Or maybe the best example is that Ron Browse meme.
Ron Browse.
Yeah, someone took a really tense, silent clip, from Marble Hornets the Operator, slowly, menacingly walking towards Jay in the woods, classic State B anxiety.
Right.
And they just slapped the audio from the Ron Brown song, Gimme $20 over it. So this terrifying cosmic entity is suddenly stomping through the woods while a rap song demands cash.
Okay, yeah, that completely breaks the tension.
It shatters it. The absurdity comes from the clash between the known horror and the unexpected mundane demand.
And structurally, these jokes work differently, too.
Yep.
They don't use the ABC thing in the same way.
That's a key insight. The horror relies on prolonging the anxiety of the transformed state. The humor often completely collapses or bypasses state B.
How so?
It often jumps straight from untouched A to some kind of ridiculous removal C. Or the threat itself is so non-threatening, like bad fashion advice, that the anxiety of state B never even arises. It becomes a simple dyadic structure. Normal person encounters funny, slender things, something absurd happens, the dread is short-circuited.
So the humor removes the power, the anxiety.
Exactly. It's a way for the community to process the fear, to reclaim a sense of control. If you can laugh at the monster, you're not trapped in that helpless transformed state anymore. You're asserting dominance over it by turning it into a punchline.
It's like a collective coping mechanism, acknowledging the horror, then deflating it.
Precisely. You have to know the fear to get the joke, but the joke itself is an act of resistance against the fear.
Okay, let's loop back to the real-world consequences. When the Waukesha stabbing happened in 2014 and the Slender Man connection became public knowledge, the societal reaction was intense, fearful, hostile even towards the internet. This seems like a textbook case of a moral panic.
Absolutely, textbook. And moral panic is a specific term here. It's important to note. It comes from sociology. Stanley Cohen defined it. It's different from just general fear.
How is it different?
A moral panic is this widespread, often exaggerated societal reaction to something, a group, a type of media, an idea that gets labeled as a threat to core social values. This threat is called the folk devil.
The folk devil. Okay.
And the reaction involves distortion, sensationalism. It blows the threat out of proportion. History is full of examples.
Like what?
Oh, the panic over comic books in the 50s corrupting kids. Fears about the devil's music, which popped up again and again. Jazz, rock and roll, heavy metal, punk.
Dungeons and Dragons causing suicide.
Exactly. D&D, video games like Doom or Grand Theft Auto. Each time a new form of media or youth culture becomes the folk devil blamed for societal ills.
And in Waukesha, the internet, specifically creepypasta, became the folk devil overnight.
Instantly. The official response kind of set the stage. The Waukesha police chief, Russell Jack, publicly warned parents. He urged them to restrict and monitor their children's internet usage and flat out stated the internet was full of dark and wicked things.
So the source of the problem was framed as the internet itself.
Directly. It was positioned as this inherently corrupting force.
And the media ran with that narrative.
Oh, absolutely. As usually happens in these situations, headlines screamed about creepypasta being an internet horror cult. Commentators popped up everywhere talking about how kids today can't tell fantasy from reality.
That classic line.
That classic line. There was talk of dark forces being unleashed by these online stories. The language was designed to scare people, especially parents, the untouched A population, about this shadowy online world.
Which leads to the counter-argument we found in the sources, that blaming the internet was just easy, a convenient scapegoat.
That's the critical perspective, yeah. It argues that the moral panic was a misdirection. These critics contend the internet wasn't the cause of what happened. It was merely the vessel.
The vessel for what?
For pre-existing severe mental health issues in the girls, maybe combined with factors like their age, their specific relationship dynamic, perhaps issues with parenting or oversight. The internet provided the content for their delusions, but didn't create the underlying condition.
So if the girls did have schizophrenia and delusional disorders, Slenderman was just the modern shape their illness took.
That's the core of the argument. Mentally unwell individuals or people under extreme psychological distress often latch onto existing narratives to structure their experiences or delusions.
You mentioned Charles Manson earlier.
Right. Manson hearing messages in Beatles songs is a classic example. Did the White Album cause the Manson family's murders? Or did Manson's existing pathology just twist the lyrics to fit his apocalyptic vision? Most would argue the latter.
So the argument is, if Slenderman hadn't existed,
the girls' underlying conditions and the toxic dynamic between them might have just latched onto something else. Vampires, demons, aliens, some other conspiracy theory, a different fictional world. The internet just happened to provide this readily available, very detailed, very dark narrative framework.
So the debate really boils down to, did the specific nature of Slenderman lore, maybe that ABC structure, make it uniquely dangerous? Or was this a tragedy waiting to happen that just found its script online?
Exactly. Was the internet causal or just contextual? Did it make them sick? Or just give their sickness a name and a goal? The moral panic, critics argue, let society avoid harder questions about identifying and treating severe mental illness in children by blaming the new, scary technology instead.
The dark and wicked internet.
Much easier to blame than systemic failures in mental health care or parenting.
Wow. Okay, this has been a lot. A really intense dive into how a digital ghost story became so much more. As we wrap up, let's try to distill the absolute key points.
Huh.
What should someone listening take away from all this?
Okay, three main things, I think.
Yeah.
First, Slender Man shows that folklore is alive and kicking, and it's happening fast now. It's not just ancient myths whispered around a fire. It can be born on a forum in 2009 and become a global phenomenon almost instantly through collective networked storytelling.
Digital folklore is real folklore. Got it.
Second, the power of the specific myth comes from that underlying structure we talked about. That ABC progression, untouched, transformed, removed. It taps into really deep fears we have about being isolated, losing control, being seen as crazy or pushed out by society. It maps onto anxieties about social death.
The structure is the key to the fear. Okay, and third.
And third, when online fantasy does intersect with real-world tragedy, the societal reaction is often predictable. We get a moral panic. We tend to blame the newest, least understood form of media, comic books, rock music, video games, now creepypasta, instead of tackling the messier, harder issues like mental health, social dynamics, or individual pathology.
The pattern repeats. New folk devil, same panic.
Pretty much. Just swap the medium.
So we've seen how this specific structure, the Slender Man mythos, reflects these deep anxieties about being sidelined, being trapped in that unstable, transformed state, feeling helpless.
Yeah, that fear of knowing too much but being powerless.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on as you navigate the digital world. We know these online narratives, these digital folklores are constantly being created, evolving, spreading.
All the time.
So think about the current trends you see online. The memes, the challenges, the weird little collective stories or games that seem totally harmless right now. Could one of them, unknowingly, be laying down the structural foundation, maybe not the content, but the shape of the narrative for the next real-world incident, the next folk devil, the next moral panic?
Because the underlying anxieties about belonging, identity, and control, they don't go away. They just wait for a new story, a new face to latch onto.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.